Hello, everyone. It's Nina Galway here, and welcome to our second RISE Parent Enrichment offering. The topic today is called Crossing the Bridge. I'm going to be going over what we call the 9-year change in Waldorf education. And it's a wonderful topic to look at because, in my view, it's a very overlooked sort of developmental phase we go through as a human. We all have in our consciousness about the terrible twos in those younger years. There's a lot written about that. And we all have in our consciousness about the teen years, and how challenging that maneuvering that phase of development can be as a parent. But very few people actually have the understanding of what the 9-year change is in their awareness. So I wanted to bring it today. It's something we take very seriously as teachers, and we actually educate for this developmental change to be as smooth as it can be. And before we go much further, what I'd like to do is take a moment and have you close your eyes for a moment and remember yourself around the age of 9, or somewhere between the years of 8 years old and 10 years old. And just as you start to sort of settle into that time of your life, you'll probably experience more of a feeling about it, feelings that you had. So just take a moment and see if you can be with that. Were there any important happenings during that time that have stuck with you, things that happened that brought deep feelings, or people, teachers or adults that you were extremely attached to, or pets, probably pets will really, when we go through the 9-year change, our pets are very big for us, as they always are, but especially at this time. So just see if you can kind of take yourself out of your adult self and into that time of childhood. I always feel that when we're about to start talking about children, it's really good to put ourselves in their shoes. They say in order to really understand someone, you have to walk in their shoes. So let's go back to our 9-year-old selves and see if we can feel that. All right, now, of course, if we were together, I'd love to have sharings from that. It's always wonderful to see what comes up, either good or bad. But it's also really great to be aware that we tend to parent as we were parented, unfortunately, or we can parent in reaction. Let's put it that way. We'll often parent in reaction to how we were parented. So because the 9-year change is such a pivotal developmental time, and it comes with so much emotion, which you'll understand more about in a minute, it can very well be that as your own child goes through this transition, that if you're not aware of what happened to you or messages you got during the 9-year change, that you might start parenting in reaction rather than from presence. And that's okay, because we're human and we do that. But to catch yourself and just go, oh, am I overreacting because of something that happened to me? Or is what's happening in front of me really just, am I able to stay present with what's happening in front of me? So the 9-year change is one of those crisis moments we have in our development as a human. And I want to bring a little bit of a bigger picture to the word crisis. In the Chinese, it actually means opportunity. So it's just that it's a time in human development that is a bit challenging, just like the terrible twos were, and just like the teen years carry that sort of challenge within it. The 9-year change has that. And I always like to put parenting in the perspective of backpacking. You know how when you go out on a backpacking trip and you're so excited, and so you have your child, you're so excited, and off you go. and you got your stuff in your backpack and down the trail, and it's so beautiful. And then you hit that first mountain with the trail winding up it, and it looks impossible. And up you go. And as you're hiking up that trail, you're like, why am I even doing this? And I'll never backpack again, and all those things. Until you get to the top of the mountain and you get to look down, and there's this incredible view, and the feeling of getting there is so amazing. And then you're like, I'm going to backpack always. And down the other side, so much fun until you hit the next one. It's very much like that in parenting. We go through these more challenging times, and for the child, there's a disorganization time as they reorganize for the next phase of development. And it can feel challenging. It feels like a crisis moment. But it's such a great opportunity for, hiking up that mountain and working those muscles with your child for the next phase. So whenever these times come up, just go, oh, right, it's like a backpacking trip. Okay. So with Waldorf education, we always feel so grateful that we can see the children over the span of 8 years. Even if it's not a one teacher with the children, we as a school, as teachers, really holding them through this 8-year journey. And I love the way Kim John Payne talks about these years between 7 and 14 as what he calls the gardening years, that the adults become more like the gardeners. When they're very young, you're the steward, and you're really holding the land and making sure that everything's just so. But as they get a little older here, and they're moving out of that, really developing the physical instrument, which of course they're still doing, but now this whole blossoming of their emotional life is happening. And he said it's just like you just need to know when to prune and when to water, and when to put a little shade cloth over things. And it's much more like gardening. I really love that. Though the way we look at it is over the 8 years here, we're really moving with the children through this huge shift of consciousness from the very young child here. You see the children on the left. This is like 4 days into first grade with my first grade class, where they're all just they're one with everything in those younger years, all the way through till 8th grade, around the age of 13, when they're strong individuals within a group. Instead of being one with everything, they're one within a whole. And so just watching this journey is such a privilege, and being a steward of that, shepherd of that. So let's look at the overview of the phases of development. We do this every time I give a talk, just so we can place ourselves in time. But between birth and 7, we really look that we're developing the physical capacities of the young child. The way the child learns is through imitation. They are not thinking about things. They are purely imitating the adults and other beings around them in order to learn. We do not learn to walk by thinking about it. We do not learn to talk by thinking about it. It's purely done through doing. And that's the way it should be. All the way up until age 7. It's really tuning that physical instrument to prepare for learning. When they come to school with us at 7 years old, we understand that they're now developing the limbic part of the brain, where the emotional body is coming into birth. It's not that they don't have emotions when they're little, but it's a whole new capacity that's being born, which you can really see in a first grader as opposed to like a 5-year-old. And so the learning happens through the imagination at this point, that they learn through their feeling life. And that is why everything is brought through the story, and everything reflected back to them is brought through the imagination, because they are thinking through the feeling life. Once they leave us and they're going on to further development in high school, between the ages of 14 and 21, we look at the true blossoming of the intellect, where the learning happens through independent thinking. And we, through lively thinking, hopefully. But that's when really the intellect in the frontal lobe there is process frontal lobe part of the brain is really developing, and that abstract thought can happen, where it really shouldn't be happening between the ages of 7 and 14. That should really, the thinking comes through the imagination for it to be healthy. So, in each of these times, we're going to look now between the age of birth, at birth to 7. There's always a crisis moment, and it has to do with individuating. It is really in our human experience, these moments where we go, who am I? And it happens in different ways. So in this time of physical development and who am I and who are you in your body, we understand this crisis that comes between the ages of about 2 or 3. Interestingly enough, it's around that time that the child, starts using I, where it goes from Mary want cookie to I want a cookie, I want this, I want that. And then there's the whole piece that a child goes through where the mother goes away, and then comes back, and the child goes through some separation anxiety usually because it's not sure, if it's beginning to be aware that it's separate, that the child feels separate from the mother physically or from the parent physically. So they're aware that the mother comes and goes, and there has to be some security developed around that. But those terrible 2 years where it's like, I want this, I want that. And of course, there's a great amount of emotion that comes with it to see what, how much power do I have? But it's a different kind of emotion. It's really done through the tantrum, which is the kicking, the screaming, the grabbing, in some children, the biting, the hitting, all the physicality of the emotion that goes along with this. And then comes that magic day where those kind of wane, especially if you don't cave into them and you let them go through it. But they, don't always get their way, and they kind of learn then how to maneuver that thing of, I want this, I don't always get it, but I do want. And so it's that beginning of feeling separate, in that stage. When we get to the elementary school years, this is where the 9-year change happens. So the crisis moment is really between the ages of 8 and 10. And it's not so much, will mother come and go and will I be okay? But it's, can I feel different? Can I individuate in my feeling, and will it be okay? So this is the time where the big emotions can come up, and we're going to talk more deeply about what you'll actually see. But it's, I have this big feeling, and do you still love me, is what the question is. With the younger child is, will you go away and will you come back? And now this is, if I go away from you in my feeling life, or you go away because you're having a strong feeling, will we come back? And it happens with children in such different ways. Again, we're going to go more into depth with this, but it's an individuating, like, what do I feel? And what do others feel about me? And it all has to do with the feeling realm. And then in the high school years, the individuation, sort of the crisis is, what do I think? And that's the whole thing about teenagers, right? I think differently than you. And of course they will, no matter what you think, they're going to think the opposite so that they can play that out. So because they want to know that they are their own person in the thinking realm. And so it's again, it's an individuation time, and the crisis happens strongly between the years of 15 and 16, around, or 17. And I remember going through it with my own son, and you're just wondering, like, this is crazy. No matter what I say, he says the opposite. And luckily, if you have some understanding what's going on, you don't take it seriously, and you just go, oh, right, they're just doing their job. Okay, so we're going to come back to that time between 7 and 14, remembering that children are developing their emotional body. So it's good to understand the anatomy then of the emotional body. Of course, it's the limbic part of the brain, and but the way I like to think of it is this sideways. Steiner gives this picture. It's a nice one to keep in mind of the sideways figure eight. That the way the emotional body works is it's a sway always between sympathy, I like, and antipathy, I don't like. I like, I don't like. And if you are very aware as you go through your day with your own feelings about things, it is either you're going towards something because you like it, or you're pulling back from something because you don't like it. That's just how that body works. Now, we tend to love the feeling good and wish we could stay on that side, but that's not how this body works. It's always a sway between feeling good and not feeling good, feeling good and not feeling good. Of course, now we have other capacities to temper this, so we can, have a strong feeling, hopefully, and reflect on that and get perspective on it. Children, on the other hand, don't have that capacity yet. I like to think of it when they're developing this body as it's a jungle gym. And just like when they were younger and you would take them to the park to play on the jungle gym, you would sort of spot them because, one, they don't step correctly on that one step and down they go. And then as they got older, you don't have to spot them so much, right? But you're just kind of there when they're young, young, young. And then as they, get to be 6 or so, you can sit back and they can play on the jungle gym without you. Well, as they begin to develop this emotional body, in the beginning, it is like a jungle gym for them. They're playing on it, and the sways are big. They love this friend, and then the next day, I hate that friend, and this is so good, and this is so bad. And as they go through the 9-year change, those sways get bigger and bigger because we're moving into the deep, deep feelings without yet the perspective of, they have no perspective on this yet. I put in that little still point there because that's a good place for you as the parent to stay to spot them. They need to develop this emotional body just like they need to develop the muscles. And Steiner tells us that we've done a good job in our teaching with the child if we can give them stories that make them cry and make them laugh within the same lesson. If we can kind of develop this body and those muscles, we're doing a good job. But as an adult with a child, if we go on that ride with them, we don't do them any service. Our job is to kind of stay in that still point in between. And it's a great exercise for all of us with our own emotional bodies to be able to stay in the still point and, be able to feel good and to feel bad without completely getting thrown off. So I love this image and I try to keep it within myself at all times. I put this in. These are things you can download off the internet. For children between the ages of 7 and 14, as they're developing the emotional body, it's really wonderful to give them vocabulary and tools. We're going to talk about some other tools coming up here. And to just make it fun. We tend to feel so afraid of emotions that are not happy. But if you look on this wheel here, we have afraid emotions, we have sad ones, we have angry ones. It's 3/4 of the wheel there as opposed to happy ones. It's a big part of the spectrum. And why, of course, we all understand those are not the feelings that we love to have. But if it's part of a figure eight, to make it okay can really help. And I had these on my refrigerator when our kids were young, and we would just have fun, just coming in the morning, and instead of like, oh, how are you feeling, and being so scared if it was a grouchy day, they would just come in and go, I'm feeling obstinate today. And it could just be more fun that way. It doesn't have to be so hard. Also, if they can just develop some of this vocabulary and see that there's so many different ways that we feel, it takes some of the anxiety off of those feelings when you're really in them and need to work with them. So, the bridge. When a child is really on this bridge of the 9-year change, and again, I want to say more about this. You're going to see somewhere between the ages of 8 and 10, you're going to see about a 6-month period where it feels strong. I was so happy I knew about this from being a teacher when my own son went through it, because I had learned about it. I had seen it happen with children in my class, but to go through it with your own child was a whole nother thing. And I was just really glad I was prepared, because it just gave me perspective and I didn't have to get pulled in to the drama. So what'll happen for about a 6-month period, again, it's so different for every child, but for a period of about 6 months, there's sort of a dramatic change in the outlook of most children. It's sort of the way I identify it is you'll see these strong moments of the child acting almost like a mini teenager. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? And then it can be followed really quickly by a huge diversion into very young behavior. They may go seek out old stuffed animals or revert to needing to sleep back in your bed, or baby talk can come up. Sort of this huge sway in them of feeling very much older or very much younger. So what is going on? What is going on? What is going on is there's a huge a growth spurt in the left hemisphere of the brain, somewhere between the age of 8 and about 9.5. And the left, so we develop the right brain, there's more activity in the right brain up until the age of 7. And the right brain is really where we feel the gestalt of things, we feel oneness, we feel timelessness, everything you see in those young children. And the left hemisphere is where we differentiate. And we truly begin to understand linear time. It's why we do not teach time to first graders in our school, because neurologically they're not really aware yet, actually have the capacity to truly understand that you can do it, but they're not there yet neurologically. We actually teach it in 3rd grade when they're going through the 9-year change. So as that part of the brain begins to develop, if that's the part of the brain that sees differences and looks at can see things more linearly, it's not, it makes sense then that some of these feelings come up that they've never felt before. I want to say one more interesting thing about this time, and that is up until about the age of 8, 7.5 to 8, the brain goes through this huge growth spurt where it's putting new pathways are myelinating like crazy. It reminds me of gardens in the spring, when after the rain, like when everything's just grow, and you have to go in and prune, and cut back to get the stronger branches. Well, that's exactly what happens. There's a dieback. There's actually a neurological dieback at this time where pathways that are not deemed as important give way to pathways that are actually thicker, stronger, and are allowing the child then to develop capacity for more abstract thinking. So not only are they developing more of this left brain growth is happening, but they're also having neurological dieback, which is giving way to these new, stronger pathways. So it's so interesting, because then come these feelings for them. So the first one is, I feel different. And I want to give a picture of this. I remember the day I picked or I taught here, but my son and I were packing ourselves up at the end of the day. He was in third grade, and he's in the back of the car, and he's pretty quiet. And I was used to that because boys don't tend to chat about a lot about their day, or he didn't anyways. And all of a sudden he's like, "Mom, am I short?" And I was like, wow. And he goes, "Someone said today that I'm short." And he was actually quite emotional about it. And I realized in that moment, I'm like, oh, right. He's going through the 9-year change. This is the beginning of it, feeling different. And before that, he was shorter than the other boys. He was one of those kids that did his huge growth spurt right around 7th grade, 8th grade. But it was devastating to him for weeks that he realized he was the shortest boy in the class. And that's part of that growth that happens with that left brain, where it's like, oh my gosh, how am I different? And with that comes, I'm alone, or nobody likes me, those feelings that can really come up. And again, you're not going to see every child go through a dramatic this or that, but somewhere in here, you're going to see them do some dance with these. So anyways, he for weeks, cried about being the shortest in the class. And basically I was just like, well, if you look at nature, nothing's ever the same. And I really hear you. And that's kind of the mantra you want to have for this time is, I hear you. I hear you. And he cried it out. And after some time went by, there off he went, and it was fine. Teasing is a big piece that comes up at this time. And that's because as kids go through the 9-year change, they do feel different. And teasing is a way that we go, oh, you're different than I am. And so we have to be really careful with how we judge kids that tease. It's kind of a part of childhood culture. And it's really just all of them trying to figure out who they are in the midst of how they feel in this feeling really different. Secondly, a question that comes up for them is the world safe? This is because, again, all of a sudden this feeling of being alone, being vulnerable, and I think coming into having a 9-year-old during this pandemic time I'm sure is challenging. I love that our third grade teacher brought right away, the second we moved into the RISE program, she brought the shelter block from the third grade, because shelter, we bring that to the third graders because thinking about homes and shelters is a very securing thing for children, especially in this time where they feel so vulnerable. That picture comes, in the stories we give them in the third grade of leaving the Garden of Eden. We tell these stories not because they're spiritual, indoctrinations, but really because they're pictures. So leaving the Garden of Eden is the classic picture for, leaving the early part of your childhood and feeling naked, feeling vulnerable as you walk out into the world. And then, there's those pictures of wandering across the desert. And it is the picture of Moses is really the picture we just are trying to give them of the adult that has their best interest, like we are going to make it. We are going to get to the promised land. So, just doing shelters with them at this time, it's a really, really important time not to give them a whole lot of the news that feels unsafe to them. It's really a good time to let your child know that they are safe no matter what. And of course, things happen for sure, but overall, our children are safe. And if you can focus on all the things in your world and in your days. Nature is such a wonderful place to go for that, to just show them, yeah, things die and then things grow and things come back, and seasons come and go, but we're safe. The sun rises the next day. Another one you hear a lot from children in the middle of the 9-year change is it's not fair. They have a huge interest in truth at this time. Um, and they're always looking around to see, who's getting more of what. And um, they're playing with truth can be a little bit challenging. Some kids will get into line at this time, and it's that deep feeling life is awake, and sometimes they're not clear whether they're lying or not. It's a really important time to try to guide them through that, like that truth is important. And as far as fairness goes, I always, I really can see from raising 3 kids in my own household and being with classes of children that the sooner we get over the thing about things being fair, the better. That they begin to see that everyone in the family is different and has different needs, and their needs are different than their brother or sister's needs, and their needs are different than classmate needs, and that things are not always going to be fair. So they'll come up with this strong feeling of it's not fair. And it's like, well, your sister, she needs this, and this is what you're going to be having. And the kicking and screaming might come. The whole point is to allow the child to feel the feelings, not to change everything and make it all fair, but to allow them to have strong feelings and know they'll survive it. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that coming up. But this is not about making it all just so for them. It's actually about being okay with them working this muscle of the emotional body. So I don't feel well is a common complaint at this time, and that's actually real. The physical changes that come during this time are real. We hear reports of stomach aches, headaches, those kinds of things. There's a general not feeling so great in the body at times. And again, depending on the temperament, it can be stronger or not. But the reality is that the way the body processes blood sugars is significant. It's a really important time to make sure the protein doses are coming regularly, not to let them go through big blood sugar drops, bringing in more essential fatty acids and really cutting back on the carbs and sugars. Because of the way the chemistry the body's going through. They need their bodies stabilized during this time to help with those headaches. The stomach aches are often just from anxiety. And so we have a lot of hot water bottles at school that go on bellies, especially for the more internal children who have that anxiety. But the anxiety is coming out of this whole sense of like, is everything okay? Because they're just beginning to maneuver this new development, and it's not easy, and it can be a little hard. The girls go through a big hormonal change at this time. Believe it or not, the sex hormones actually begin to come in quite strong, especially around 9.5. Believe it or not. And, some parents even say they can begin slight beginnings of seeing monthly cycles, even if there's no bleeding happening, just because those hormones kick in. Do you love me? Do you love me? I've also heard my son ask me, are you sure I'm not adopted? And it's again, this feeling of like, I'm different. I feel different. Am I really? So they'll look to, do you love me? While they're being sort of trying on all this emotional garments, let's put it, say, big feelings. Then they'll, the big question underneath is, do you still love me unconditionally? And it's not unusual for children to feel like that as a parent, you love one sibling more than the other. I remember distinctly going through this around 9. I was sure my mom loved my brother more than she loved me. And her phrase was so great. I remember it. She was always like, the sun shines equally on all the different flowers. So your brother's this flower and you're that flower, and I'm the sun and I'm shining down equally. And somehow that made me feel better. And lastly, will you die? Will we die? This understanding of our mortality really kicks in around this time. I remember this distinctly as a 9-year-old. I was terrified my mom was going to die. It's not unusual. Um, Nightmares can come in, and again, once we kind of have the brain development where we have a past and a future happening, then it's inevitable that this question of death comes in much more strongly. So it's actually, again, a great time to turn a child towards nature, and it's like, yeah, things do die. We can't deny that. Um, but we also, don't have to wallow in that with them. But it's also like, yeah, things do die. So there's this little quote that one of my teachers put in I remember when we were in training, and it really stuck with me. And he said, this is from the eyes of a 9-year-old. It seems only yesterday I used to believe there was nothing under my skin but light. If you cut me, I would shine. But now, when I fall upon the sidewalk of life, I skin my knees and I bleed. And that's painful. At the same time, this is part of what it is to be human, to come out of, feeling this oneness with everything and into individuating and becoming an individual. And it's not always easy. But I have to say that the more comfort that we have with this, the better the chances are of them crossing this bridge in a healthy way. Because on the other side is a feeling of oneness that comes out of also being an individual, that we are an individual, also a part of one. So support, creative outlets are essential, whether it's building art or if it's artwork, hobbies, having a place for these feelings to go. And that is why in Waldorf education, there's such a strong emphasis on the arts. Arts, as they say, arts should be the servant to the child during this time. So find all the ways. I have to say, I'm on my knees to my mother who took our TV away. I was about 7.5, 8 years old. I have 3 siblings, and she took our TV away because she was actually getting her master's in psychology and studied child psychology. So she took our TV away, and she built this huge craft room, and we hated her for about a month. And then we dived in, and I remember getting lost in that room. It was always supplied with all this craft stuff, and she would just leave us alone in there for hours and hours and hours and hours. We also had the capacity to be outside a lot, building tree forts and with the neighbors, and there was no play dates at that time. You just played outside, and huge creative outlets. Really grateful for that. Challenges. The 9-year-old needs challenges, craves challenges. They can't tell you that, but this is what they are looking for, to know that you see them as getting older. Story for you. The way we maneuvered this with my son was he and his best friend, they were 9 years old. We took them to Squaw Lakes, and we were camping with my brother and a bunch of family, and we knew what we were doing, but we had this huge dinner ceremony. And in the middle of the night, my brother and my friend, and with his son, they took the boys out of our tents, and they put them in a canoe, canoed them across Squaw Lake, drove them without telling them what was going on, drove them to Mount McLaughlin and hiked them up that mountain. They were terrified in the beginning, and basically once they got to the base of Mount McLaughlin, they're like, we're going to climb this. And the boys kicked and screamed and cried, and there's like, no way, and we want to go back. And they said, there's no way to go back until we get up that mountain and come back down. And it was life-changing. It was life-changing. On the top of the mountain, after they made it, they were so proud of themselves, so proud of themselves. At the top of the mountain, the men sat them down and they wrote notes to their 18-year-old selves and put them in boxes. And at 18, my son got that note that he wrote to himself. I'll tell you what, he was never the same after that. Every time we drove by Mount McLaughlin, he's like, I climbed that. It's such a great time to up their chores, up their responsibilities, do some little rite of passage with them, boys and girls both, but have some element of challenge in it because they aren't, just challenging that fear inside, like, can I do this? Can I do this? And when they feel like they can, it is such a wonderful thing for them. And giving them tools. The emotional body, as we all know, can be overwhelming. So mindfulness tools, breathing, EMF tapping. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Tapping. I tap with children all the time at school. I'll actually put the handout as one. I'll add the handout in about tapping. I talk to them about shaky brain, that it's not bad to have shaky brains when we're feeling so we are not acting or thinking straight, and what you can do with that, which is either healthy movement, breathing, tapping, but just giving them some tools to know that they can have something they can hang on to when the emotions are very overwhelming. And these are tools that they'll have for life. So there's plenty out there to look these things up, and I'm also happy to chat with anybody about tools. So I like to think of 3 things when I'm thinking about parenting through the 9-year change. And we're just going to go with A, B, and C. There's many, many things, but A, B, and C will do it. So A, authority. They need an authority figure. This is not the time to be the best friend. The whole thing that's going on here is they want somebody to push up against, and they need to push up against. It's going to be through the emotions, and they need somebody to go, here's the line. So it's an important time to really sit down with yourself or your partner, whoever's helping to parent the child, and go, how can we let them know we're letting the line out? Like, oh, maybe now you can ride your bike to this far instead, because you're getting older. But when the line is drawn, you want to know that it's not crossed. This is a precursor to how much they will trust your authority when they're teenagers. I was so happy I knew that. And my little story about that is I had my son and I would make agreements, and at 9, we had agreements. And if he crossed that agreement, there was just natural consequences that would happen. It wasn't a big angry thing. It was just a natural consequence. I'll remember we were driving to the coast one day, and we had an agreement about this trip that we could go if. And he crossed the line, and I was like, driving, we had only gotten not very far, and I was like, he completely crossed the line, and we had an agreement. And I knew that if I didn't follow through in that moment, that it was over. And I followed through. That trip did not happen. I'll tell you what, when he had those car keys at 15 and 16, he knew that I was somebody you followed through with. So I just want to put that out there. It's an incredible time to practice that with very loving authority, that a line is a line. Also that at this time, when the child's younger, going through, under the age of 7, there can be the hitting, spitting, biting thing when they're really angry. At this age, it's the words, and it's really important in a family to let the child know that we don't hit with words. So it's okay to be angry and have really big feelings, but you need to let them know what they can do with that. And that is not to completely bash you with words. So again, I'm happy to give tools to people if you're running up against this, if you want to come on the Zoom call. But they can go and hit pillows, they can rip up paper, there's so many things that can be done, but to really, this is when you want to begin to build the culture of how we treat each other in a family, even when we're angry. And then, look at the temperament thing, because being that authority figure for the different temperaments where they're feeling met, not bashed, is really important. So we want to be loving authority at this time. They need a Moses to get them across the desert, like, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. And yet it's, it doesn't come with a lot of meeting their big emotion with your big emotion. It comes out of a very calm, steady place. Beauty. This age child thrives on beauty, so bringing it into the home, having nature tables, taking them out into nature a lot, even if it feels like maybe they're not taking it in, they are. Simplifying their room, really looking at toys that can go away, and keeping the environment not so chaotic is very supportive during this time that feels a bit chaotic to them. Again, art is the servant, so a lot of creative outlets. If they're not artists, then building or gardening or creating beauty. Making the dinner table beautiful. It's very, very calming to this age child. And C, calm. Number one, stay off the roller coaster. Don't go on the emotional roller coaster with them. That takes a lot of inner work. I get it. Parenting is a spiritual path, and it's a path. It's a path of self-development. So whatever tools, whatever support you get for yourself, bringing in rhythm brings calm. So schedules that they can count on really, really help. And bringing just that calm feeling that life is good. And sometimes we have to dig for that in ourselves when things are happening for us, or we're looking at world events. But really digging and finding that place where, yes, actually life is good, even in the midst of hardship. Ultimately, life is good. That can help calm the 9-year-old. On the other side, so my next talk is actually going to be about the 12-year-old. But on the other side, when we see a child through this period of time, 8 to 10 years old, and they're boistered by, good authority, you're the riverbank for their waters to flow through. They're met with an education that really mirrors back to them the change in their consciousness, where they feel seen, where beauty is put before them, where they have the opportunity to participate in beauty, and where the adults around them show them, a calmer rhythm, and can have the capacity, even if you're just striving for it, to, use tools that in the family, like the safe language, which I'll also put as a handout, where we can air these hard feelings or our emotions with some kind of framework that keeps, the environment calm and not scary. So talking sticks and good communication skills. Then on the other side, what we see time and time and time again are these children that we get to graduate and release into the world that have this beautiful perspective on life, and this incredible intellect that gets to build on a healthy emotional life. So I'm going to end today with a piece that was written by one of the graduates from my class, and I think it'll just give you a real picture of what it's like on the other side when they have the perspective. This was the piece. Every one of our graduates speaks at their own, every single one of them reflects at their graduation of a moment or a reflection of their education. And this is one that he wrote called True Wealth. When I came to Siskiyou School in third grade, life came into color. Bright shades burst onto the daily palette of learning, replacing black and white education that I had before. School became more than just a place for learning and textbooks. Every day was a day of discovery. Each year, from third to eighth grade, between grammar, math, history, and science, I've been on expeditions with my class, each one changing my view of life. My whole experience at Siskiyou School was like a giant 5-year play full of laughter, drama, tears, and seeing my classmates in new roles every day. Yet none of it was rehearsed or scripted. As we close the curtain on our journey together, each of us has been a hero and a damsel in distress. And now we are here at our happy ever after as we take our bow and let others take the stage. From Whidbey Island in Washington to the Trinities in Mount Lassen in California, we've lived into adventures that have woven themselves into our hearts and minds. When I leave this school, I will always have these cherished memories with me. When a person passes from this lifetime, he cannot take money or power with him, nor can he take the struggles or hardships. When our time comes, all we can wish to leave behind are memories that live in the people who remember us, the laughing, the dancing, the singing, the beauty, the sitting with each other. This is our gold when we share our essence. I have done the most important things a human can do with others in my class. I have experienced true wealth during my years here, and my heartbeat has grown strong in the process. It is the ending and beginning of a necklace of memories, a necklace I will always wear across my heart and share with as many people possible on my journey ahead. So there you have it, a beautiful reflection of the heartbeat that we can strengthen as we cross the bridge at this time of life. Okay, thank you for being here today. There will be a Zoom call scheduled, so I'll look forward to seeing some of you there. Until then, happy parenting.